Welcome to Monday Morning Coffee with Inside the Firm. Each week, our hosts will be interviewing local, regional, and national business leaders to give you an inside peek into how they lead their business to success in the ever-competitive business climate.
Welcome to another episode of Inside the Firm, Monday Morning Edition. I'm here with Dwayne MacEwen. He is the Principal and Creative Director of Chicago-based DMAC Architecture, PC. He comes to architecture through construction. The son of a builder, he had early exposure in the discipline, which led him to become proprietor of a successful Canadian construction firm early in his firm. Dwayne, welcome inside the firm. How are you doing?
Well, listen, thank you so much for having me. Doing great.
Good. I think it's very interesting the contractor or construction person's path into architecture. My business partner Lance worked for construction before then going to a community college and then realizing like, oh, I can go become an architect, and then went that route. So what experiences did you have growing up? Did you know that you wanted to be an architect, or were you thinking construction?
I mean, I think, early on, my dad was a contractor builder, had his own construction company, and literally the only summer job I've ever known since I was 12, literally, which was probably in the way, but, he'd take me to work with him. I would be taking nails at the boards, whatever. But, fast forward 3 or 4 summers later, I'm in high school, and I decided, I said, Dad, I'm 16. I want to build my own house. So we literally, he bought 2 lots. The first summer he built one. He built next to me to make sure that I had it under control. And in high school, I built 2 spec homes. I was in 11th grade and 12th grade. And I think people that know the world of architecture, I think sadly I made more money in hockey or in high school than I did for the first decade of my professional career, which is okay. Yeah. The rewards aren't necessarily tangible, in this profession, but definitely you can't put it in the bank, but the rewards are still there for sure.
So what made you then leap into architecture?
So I think,
or maybe there's some time in between that process.
I grew up in a very small, place on the east coast of Canada. 100,000 people, Prince Edward Island, small province. Some of my dad's friends were architects, and they literally talked me out of going into architecture school. They're like, "There's not enough work for architects here." So I went into engineering. I did 2 years of engineering. One of my engineering professors talked to me and he said, have you ever thought about architecture? Because he seemed like I cared way too much. I seemed to care way too much about what things look like, and this sort of thing. Or maybe he just wanted me out of the engineering, field. So, fast forward, it seemed to become natural. I applied. I went to the Technical University of Nova Scotia, which is now Daltech, in Halifax, in Nova Scotia, Canada. So actually did a 4 years bachelor master's. We had 2 weeks off every summer, very intense, 2 work terms. So great experience. And, I think looking back on it, my construction background was both a curse and a crutch, more of a crutch sort of my profession now. But I think early on, I felt like I had to unlearn what I thought architecture was. I was doing these very modest builder homes. We barely had plans. We would sort of make it up on the fly and, sort of got to build one to one. And I think in a way that sort of helped me that when I'm drawing or designing now, it's not just line work in front of me. I'm sort of in the room, in the space. I think I sort of traced that back to, my dad would be, let's make the kitchen a little bigger, let's move the bed, but literally we'd be laying out boards on the floor and sort of doing it one to one. So I think some of those experiences early on have definitely, affected the process in terms of how I work. But I also think it gives us a lot of credibility with contractors. And I sort of understand why a lot of contractors hate architects. If you've never built anything, and just because you drew it doesn't make you the expert in the room necessarily. And I think I've always tried to learn something from every project we do. And sometimes it's pushing back hard, against contractors that don't want to do it because they're lazy. And sometimes they have a better way and you can learn from them. So I think it's sort of understanding, the sort of benefit analysis of sort of being aware and being present on site is something that's, I think, elevated our practice to where I think most of our clients realize that we sort of lean in and do a lot more than most architectural firms. And if we can't, it's not unusual for me to fly in with a fishing rod case that's 10 feet long, but there's no fishing rods in it. It's a mock-up or a sample that we did in the shop in the office to show the contractor, like, no, you can do this. This is important that you get this right for the project.
Yeah. I think one of the main benefits of going out in the field and constructing is it's taking all those lines on a page and everything that the professor talks on the whiteboard and the sections that they draw or that a firm owner draws. And it takes those lines and it makes it concrete reality. Like, oh, there's the stud wall. Oh, there's the anchor bolt. Oh, these here's where the vapor barrier goes. And just seeing it in person translates so much better than even hours and hours of just drawing on the computer. But like you said, there is a fine line, because Lance, my business partner who had a lot of firm experiences, his drawings in the beginning of school were very plain Jane, practical, whatever was happening in North Dakota, which is I don't think is the pillar of architecture. I haven't heard anyone say that.
Maybe
enough people haven't been there. But he had to learn out of that. And by third, fourth year, then he was doing more creative stuff, but then could understand how things go together. So it definitely is that balance for sure.
Yeah, and I think, early on too, one of my favorite professors in school and was my thesis supervisor ultimately, like Brian McKay Lyons, Nova Scotia, wonderful architect, educator. And I remember doing a building studio with him. I think it was my second year, but we designed these projects, then they made us draw a building draw a detail 1-to-1. So it wasn't this sort of cute little drawing. It was this massive sheet. And, if you had to draw it on an 8x10 sheet of plywood to make it fit, then, he made us do that sort of work so that it gave you a sense of, connections, details, and stuff that really matters in architecture. Because we're really dealing with, walls, vertical plane, horizontal plane, and those, how do those details come together, which is really, sort of our life's work and sort of, I think, in a way, the currency of our craft. Like, how do those things come together? And that's where the magic happens most of the time, I think.
Absolutely. How did you get from Canada to the U.S.?
Sort of a long story. So I'd worked at Building Design Partnership in London, my first work experience, this massive 700-person firm. We worked on the Channel Tunnel between, London and France back in, I think, in 1988. So that dates me a little bit. Fast forward a couple of years later, I was in Barcelona pre-Olympics, working in 1990 and some of the Olympic stuff, amazing experience, much more boutique firm. And I realized then that, when I have my own practice, that's what I want to do. So much like I went to Barcelona and London to sort of study and learn the craft of architecture, Chicago in the early 90s, I had a very good friend that was coming here that I went to school with. So we moved here together, and there was an old saying that if you can't find work anywhere, you can find it in Chicago. So in the early 90s, that seemed important. I arrived to look for work the day that the Chicago River sprung a leak. I don't know if you remember that, when somebody drove through the river and they started to fill all the underground tunnels. So most of my interviews were shut down because they had evacuated the loop, essentially. One architect, Jordan Moser, was looking for somebody with 30 years experience. So I applied fresh out of school, we got the stiff arm, the first meeting. But I think because of my construction experience, I sort of forced my way in. And I think a month later, I was on a plane with him flying to Germany with some of this, custom mock-ups we had made in the office where we built out a shop. So I think sometimes, so coming to Chicago was really, I thought I'd be here for 1 or 2 years and sort of move on. And then I had an opportunity from a client that somebody cold called me. I think I turned 30, got married, and quit my job the same month.
Nice. Good. Okay. Yeah. You always advise that you do that, right? Exactly. That's the way.
My wife was a nurse running the gynae OR at Northwestern Hospital in Chicago. So I think she was up for it, supported, the first 6 years, but opened DMAC in 1995 and really haven't looked back. Honestly, it was we've done work all over the country, hundreds of projects, and it's been pretty amazing. Actually, I think it's one of those things when you're that young starting and you don't know how hard it's going to be. I think in a way that's a good thing because you might never start otherwise. So you're working super long hours, didn't matter. And again, it was always about the quality of the work that I always said, to even the staff, it's the money comes and goes, but your reputation will last forever. So that's really been the focus. So I think during the up and down turns, in 2008, we've actually doubled in size, and it seemed like a lot of the clients that we worked incredibly hard for over the years, and we're still doing stuff. We were on their short list, with people they still wanted to use for the stuff they were still moving forward with.
There's a book called The Innovator's Dilemma. And basically one of the ideas that it lays out is the people that know how to do anything, semiconductors, making cars, they know too much to start over.
It makes so much sense. Yeah.
And it's funny too, because I think architects, well, the analogy is Tesla. They know too much about cars to say we're going to start from scratch and actually make this work because they know all the hurdles. I think that's almost a problem too in the construction industry. And this is just a total tangent, and maybe get your thoughts on it. So housing affordability is a big issue, and there's certain ways to make houses, from custom houses to developer houses, and then now modular houses. And there's so many parts to architecture and so many things that need to fit in and so many things that need to work with the city and the bureaucrats and all that. It's like you almost need an experienced person, but that experience also weighs you down. It's like, okay, then we need to do it this way, not, a new innovating way. I don't know if that's totally tangential to this or if you had any thoughts about that.
No, and I think, I've always said, like, being the expert in the room is not necessarily an asset a lot of the times, because I think if you come and think you know the answers, then you're not really moving anything forward. But I think in our practice has always been with, I think it's sort of knowing that it's more important to ask the right questions than to think you have all the answers, because I don't think anyone has all the answers, or otherwise if you're not learning and progressing, then I don't know how we're moving the profession forward, honestly. So I think a lot of our best projects have been first, like, this Concourse Club that we're doing in Miami right now. We didn't do the track, but it's a 77-acre site. We were brought in to do one or two, interiors projects, and we took over the whole project because I think we took a hospitality approach, meaning that the spaces that we design and the buildings that we construct need to have an emotional impact. Like if there's no emotion to that space, then what are we doing? So like this guardhouse, for example, or some of the comfort station stuff that you're showing on the screen now, we want to make sure that, we were creating a hospitality type space in that in-between space, like between the buildings, between the northbound garages, between the comfort station, between the shade structures, so that if there's nothing on track and nothing going on, you just want to hang out in the space because it's a good outdoor room. And I've always said that, architecture is really the space in between. It's not the wall. Architecture is not the wall. It's a space that you create by drawing that wall or building that wall. So that if it's just trying to be interesting, you make a curved wall because you want the wall to be interesting. I think that's something other than architecture. I think it's really about how do you define these spaces, and how do you create, like, for example, this image right here, we were asked to do the fuel station. Like, why can't your car look better than it ever looked for that moment with you and your car? And these are $1 million automobiles that, these lines of light that wrap the structure. We worked with great lighting.
Could you describe the picture for people listening?
Yeah, so this is literally like, this is racing fuel, whatever. It's, probably $8 a gallon, maybe 16 by now with current fuel rates. But, we're asked to do a fuel station, and there's an obvious, way to do it. And they had a company that does these all the time. But we say, we have this, modified ash, wood underbelly. And we worked with a great lighting designer, Thomas from Lux Populi. And we really want to create this sort of moment, like when you get out of your car and you put fuel in it, it's, you in your car, and it's never looked better. These lines of light that, wrap the contours of these incredible automobiles. And it becomes a moment. So we didn't really have to put a sign and say, this is where you put gas in your car. It's not a typical fuel station, but there are all these sort of nodes around the campus. And we wanted this to feel more like a museum campus than, a racetrack, which is, paddock. And you can see even a lot of the lights where at nighttime, it has a certain ambiance to it. So if you're not on track, you just want to hang out there. I mean, you're 10 miles from South Beach. There's no reason to stay there. But I've been there many nights late, and people would rather be here than on the beach. It's just a great vibe.
I agree. When I first saw this, I'm not a racer. I understand how hard it is to actually be good at that. And my first reaction was, oh, can I just go hang out there? Like, can I just, that's my inclination, is to hang out and just watch it and look at the cars.
But and I think too, what's interesting about sort of our process, and again, I did 120 flights last year to Miami, commercial, probably another 20 or 30 private with a client. And that's round trip, so probably 60 trips down, 60 back. But there was that ceiling sculpture that was in the temporary clubhouse that we did. I realized that when I was on, I could tell Helio Castroneves, who won Indy 4 times, professional racer, Brazilian guy, wonderful, wonderful person. He's one of the founding members. And I could always tell when he was on track before I got to the track, because there was just something different about the sound of him taking laps. So I got a recording of him driving the track. And one night I came back to the office, headphones on, much like you're wearing right now, and your eyes closed, and just started sketching with charcoal, and then sort of bending with armature wire these 11 turns of the track. And that ceiling sculpture that's in the temporary clubhouse, it's a 1:50 scale mock-up or model of the length of the track, but it's really, what does the sound of the track look like? So it became, if I didn't do all those trips and understand that, I didn't sort of eyes wide open in terms of inspiration for what we need to add to the project, I don't know if that piece ever would have happened. I didn't get there day one. It came out of the process of sort of being there, being present, being, sort of, wide awake, and letting some of those ideas slip in the back door of the design process, which is, to me, that's when projects are good, when they teach you something, so that the next one, your sort of survival kit of things. That's why I think they always say architecture is an old person's profession, because I think the more you learn, the better prepared you are for the next project often.
Yeah. Could you maybe dissect the journey from going off on your own to where you're at? And the specific question is, I feel like sometimes it's hard to explain to certain clients the value that they get. And it's easier once you have a project like the one you just described, where you can show them they want to be there and you can talk to them. And what I'm saying is that it's easier just because you've proven yourself. But your beginning projects, how were you able to convey that, or did you kind of have to scrap and slowly build up? Or were you able to say, hey, I worked at this firm, this is what I did, I'm awesome, pay me a bunch of money?
Yeah, it was scrap and ramp up. I mean, honestly, it was. I mean, I think somebody told me once, or forget which famous architect said it, to be an architect, you need either born rich or marry rich, and I'm neither. So sort of do it the hard way. But I think, my first client, again, when I turned 30, got married, quit my job, it was Mark Jacochi, sort of a celebrity hair guy in Chicago. And it was sort of random thing. One of his partners used to cut my hair, and he hated the design of the salons. So he introduced me to him, wanted me to do their night, because we were always talking design in the chair. So fast forward, he calls me and he gave me this, it's in a shopping mall, 30 miles outside of Chicago. He told me later that if I screwed it up, it didn't matter. But I worked so hard on that project, very probably underbidded, underpaid, didn't matter. But when we finished it, again, it was sort of about asking the right questions. We had solved so many functional relationships that he hadn't resolved in 20 years before that, and building this empire, this sort of salon business. And he wished that he had that in his flagship on Michigan Avenue. So, 2 years later, we're doing his flagship on Michigan Avenue. And then, a year and a half after that, he bought a penthouse downtown Chicago, right on the lake. And, we did his penthouse. And that's sort of the ultimate. It's one thing for a client to trust you with their commercial enterprises, but when they ask you to do their house, mm-hmm. you can't screw that up. So, that's sort of, and we don't do a lot of residential, but most of the residential we do is for, again, the owner of Midtown. We did his lake house, Marchacochi. We've done, I'd say for some of our best clients, we've done, whether it's in Aspen or whatever, we've done, the residential properties. So I sort of take that as a sort of badge of honor, and that they trust us with their personal life as well, or where they live.
Yeah. I want to read something from your website and kind of riff off of it. Quote, "We are an architecture firm, but more than that, we are storytellers. From the epics that bring together a series of buildings into a collective experience, of a master plan to the antidotes that weaves together the details of an entire building." So when did you, or had you always had that architecture was the storytelling of the soul of the business of the client? Was that from the get-go? Did that kind of evolve?
But I think I know there's a lot of talk about sort of a narrative in architecture or a theme. And I think I look at it in a slightly different way. I think the narrative comes out of the process a little bit, in the sense that, and I would say early on, every project you start, and this sounds silly, but you only know what you know, which sounds incredibly obvious. You can't know any more than that. So sometimes to sort of move the departure point in the creative process, or create a myth around the project, and maybe it's from a book or a story, or talking to the client, or one client in New York, he wanted to do this sort of 30s glam project where he wanted me to watch Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers movies, and it's for inspiration. I didn't, but I sort of got where he wanted to go. But it did displace the departure point. We didn't give him this knee-jerk response. It didn't have to look like this. But in terms of letting some of those ideas sneak in the back door of the design process, I wouldn't have got there without that displacement of the departure point of the creative process from that one client. And I would say, even in the work now, like the example of that ceiling sculpture at the Concourse Club, that was another example of, telling the narrative, and there's a backstory to it. But we didn't start with that. We didn't say what does the sound of the track look like? But I think it's trusting the process in a way that, and I think in a sort of honest way, that's how we don't become trapped by trend or what's the flavor of the month. So I think we want our work to be timeless, in the sense that, it's not ripped off the pages of Pinterest, which is sort of a curse for us, because everyone's coming with their Pinterest boards and what about this? What about this? And at some point, I don't know if you paint, but if you paint and you throw all this stuff, you get mud at the end of the day. So I think it's being very aware of establishing a hierarchy. And again, it sort of goes back to music in a way that, if there's no space between the notes, it's just noise. And I think architecture designs that way too. So there's that repose or that spot pause, that's sort of where the magic is. And it's a very subjective thing, honestly. Like it's sort of, playing off a response, like from being a good listener, how a client responds to it. And you might show up at a meeting wanting to present something, so excited about it. And sometimes it's deflating when they don't necessarily love everything, but 2 days later, it's like, oh my God, it's so much better because of that conversation. So I think, again, it's sort of trusting the process. And I've been on my own for 27 plus years, and have an incredible team at the office, and it's a very sort of lateral structure. Like it's not, to be fair, it's not a singular effort. Everyone adds value to the process, and it's been incredible to have a great sort of team in that sense.
Yeah. Well, maybe I want to bring up a project, and maybe you can talk through the process, and how that kind of works. The hotel at Midtown. Um, what was
Yeah,
that
so
process like?
this is an interesting one. So it's over 500,000 square feet of health club and hotel, and this is an interesting one where the hotel is actually an amenity to the health club. We've been doing the client's works for the past decade. We'd never done a hotel before, but sort of convinced them that, one meeting, because he actually came from the hotel world. One meeting, he was looking at, giving it to the sort of de facto rest of the hotel designers. And we put a rendering package together. Actually, this one, we said, he said, yeah, that's what I want my hotel to look like. Where is that? It's like, that's your hotel. We just designed it. And literally in our office, we ended up building 2 full-size hotel rooms with showers and toilets and beds in the office. But we had, sort of a warehouse, sort of mock-up space where we built everything. And, so I think that was sort of the trust with the client, and to work at every nuance of detail, like even the rotation of this fire smoke alarm, so that you couldn't see that little green light if you're lying in bed. Like, so you don't get that blanket. People are light sensitive, or, if you look at the detail, for the tissue holder on the adjacent to the sink, you can climb in that. It's not going to come out of the wall. I don't know if you've seen a lot of hotels, but you'll always see a rat there in the wall. They've been reattached numerous times. So we want to make sure that this thing could survive whatever happened. And in this case, we did the entire fitness center. So the fitness center is 94% of the square footage. The hotel is 6%.
Wow, that must be a huge fitness center.
It is massive, and it's sort of it is, people came from all over the world literally to see the fitness center I was done, because it sort of transcended what the fitness center experience is.
Is it just like I don't know, a local fitness center that everyday people go to, or is it like a
it's
professional?
Midtown Chicago. So it's actually second or third generation. I think this goes back to understanding the family too. So we've been doing work for them. We did their first one in Montreal maybe 15 years ago. We've done a lot of remodeling work, and then this is the flagship that was built in my client's, his dad built this with his father in the 70s. And, a little more of a backstory. The Alan Schwartz, who used to be the head of the USTA, I think he was 82 when he took me to Bangkok to meet with the prime minister or deputy prime minister of Thailand, because they wanted to do a training facility over there. So got to 4 days in Bangkok, meeting with people over there, but doing the training facility. I got to know him very well on the 24-hour plane ride in both directions for a 4-day trip. But so fast forward 5 or 6 years later, he's asking, what are we doing with the old club? He had this copper fireplace and some oak paneling that wasn't particularly attractive. But I know there was a sentimental value to it because he had built that with his dad, in the 70s. So again, I asked the contractor to salvage everything, send it to my office. At the end of the job, we did this. So this, if you look at this picture here, and I'll go back to the other story in a second, but this stone wall behind, we wanted, because this is the entry to the hotel and to the health club, want to do something that was sort of monumental and had a presence. But if you're hopefully seeing it 3 or 4 times a week, if you're a member, to the health club, that it didn't become too ostentatious or, overly signed. So each of those slabs weighs over 3,000 pounds. We had this Kavitha, who was a project architect, went to India on a Tuesday. Thursday, she picked out the stone. We had it fabricated over there. We were each piece again weighs over 3,000 pounds. Even the reception desk for the check-in is one 8,000 block of stone that we had procured, fabricated, and shipped over. So when I say where there's a will, there's a way. This didn't go through the general contractor. This went through my office. I think we paid $6,000 for the fabrication of the stone and another $60 to ship it and get it installed. But still, That was an important part.
Do you build any of the projects yourself, or are you just more of hey, where there's something hard or weird, we can handle the
that's yes. We sort of do the harder, weirder stuff.
Yep.
Whether it's custom FF&E, and there's, I mean, that's an area that we're looking to do, but I'd probably start more on the residential side of it, and not the bigger commercial projects. But you can see like the wood ceiling, we've used over 18 miles of this European oak in this project between the fitness floor and some of the other areas.
And did you say there was another story you wanted to come back to, but we got
stuck
if you
on go back, if you go forward, I think there's, if you go through these slides here, like this is the hotel.
Here we go.
I think you're in the hotel part. There is a, if you go into the health club part.
Let's see.
Back to the home page. I'm sorry.
No worries. Oh, some construction photos.
That was in our office.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's a nice. Yeah. I don't know if I can navigate that smoothly through all of it.
But I mean, the story on the other thing with the client, and the old club, we ended up making this decorative ceiling feature over the entry to the main club, and we won a Divine Detail award for it from the AAA, which was again it wouldn't have happened if I didn't go to Bangkok, probably, with the owners or my client's dad, and had this sort of moment with him. They were sort of sentimental on that side.
Yep. Going through the 2008 recession, this is more topical, so maybe in a year or two this part of the conversation won't matter. But are you seeing a pullback? Are you seeing acceleration? Are you seeing stoppage? Are you concerned?
I mean, it seems like, we're incredibly busy right now, honestly. It's there seems to be a lot going on, and I think we always proceed with caution in terms of growing. We're still a boutique firm. We're maybe 25, people at this point. I think if we had to add another 10 people, I would want to almost stop there. I think at some point, you stop being nimble enough where we can handle everything. And I think, we probably have 15 projects going in the office right now. And what I like about how we work is that there is no interiors department. Everything's sort of much more holistic and lateral. That in the way that architecture historically contained the arts, it seems like as it's become more of a commodity, it's become a container for the arts, where you design a building, it goes to the interiors department, and it becomes this plug and play, and it becomes more of a commodity. And I really don't think it should be. I think, a lot of the times, we've acted as both architectural record for interior designers. We've done the interiors where there's another architectural record we're working under, and we've done both, and we prefer to do both. And I think we're good at it in the sense that, some of the materials and finishes can become, they become part of the idea. They don't become the idea. They become a way to express what the concept is. And I think too often, we've gotten into projects where we've been asked to do the interiors, and it's sort of a mediocre or often, bad space planning that you try to fix it with the decorating, which I don't know if I sort of even like that word, because I think, my belief is that emotional impact that the real sort of magic or architecture only exists really in the negative space. It's that space in between. And if I'm sure you've been to Europe and some of the big cathedrals, it doesn't matter whether the lights are on or off, you're in these sort of wonderful spaces, and it's not about the latest trend wall covering or whatever. And all that can sort of help and embellish it maybe, but that shouldn't be, what defines the room, so to speak.
Practically speaking, do you hire architects and just have them be well versed and go through these projects, or do you hire interior designers and make sure they're part of the project all the way through?
we're primarily 100% architects in the office. We have a couple of interiors that are wonderful. There's no sort of pecking order in that hand. Yeah. And I think we just do a lot of material research. Like we have a 5,000 square foot, material library, massive. We have a full shop with, we have a beam saw that can cut tile for, if you want to miter, do a full miter on some porcelain tile, we can do it. So I've jumped on planes many times with a piece of tile that's perfectly mitered by the architect. So when the tile person tells me that you can't do it, let's just use a schluter that's easier. I just sent him a picture of the beam saw now. I said, "Do you really want me to do this again?" So I think that part of it gives, from the construction background, gives us a lot of credibility and being able to sort of hands-on, not be afraid to do some of that work.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we wrap up, any topic you wanted to touch on or any message you want to convey?
I think so I have two boys, 19 and 21, Cameron and Evan, and it's interesting. I did not push either one of them into the profession, and as much as I love it, I think you sort of have to love this profession, and I think at least those of us who sort of believe in it and that it sort of adds value, and we're sort of a living art in a way that we're responsible for hopefully making people's lives better, or, how they experience the world. And, I'd say the same thing when we're doing, to be a good citizen, you sort of have to give something back. And I think to be good architecture, you sort of have to give something back to the street. And so that's a lot of it in what we do. It's not this sort of singular event, but we sort of coexist with and can be inspired by, what's next to us. And I honestly think I learned a lot of that even when I went to Barcelona. I studied a lot of Gaudi and Jujol's work, obviously. And it wasn't necessarily for the aesthetics, for what it looked like, but how it engaged. And there's some of Gaudi's work, which is aesthetically so different than anything else around. But you can see some of the scroll work coming down in that horizontal street line. There's one on Lepidrea and Casa Gracia where the building next door, there's a frieze, very traditional building, but Gaudi's very organic scroll work. It acknowledges that line and connects to it without replicating it. So, and that's where I think sort of doing your own work, not following trends, and that's where I think is what's important for what we do.
Absolutely.
Probably more of an answer than you wanted.
No. Lastly, if people want to follow your work or get in touch, where should they go to find more?
I think our website, DMAC Architecture and Interiors, we did flip the DMAC Architecture PC to Architecture and Interiors, because we always get the question, who does your interiors? And we're sick of answering it, saying we do. So we've sort of taglined the and interiors to the back of what we do. So yeah, it's DMAC Architecture and Interiors. We're in Chicago. Easy to find, I think.
Awesome. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much.